Alright, time for another DebatePhysics.com video presentation. This one on the YouTube, I guess, because, the simulation is working better. I should do a video kind of dedicated to demonstrating that the simple 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics does work. The silly little bits doing their silly little thing. Yeah, it actually does consolidate matter. Creates every foundation in terms of functions that would lead to the creation of atoms and the functions of atoms in terms of it being force manipulated by matter and such. Little bit ultraviolet light. Yeah. So, if I put it on the render hits, you do get to see that a little more clearly, the fact that the engine created does have the capacity to change what happens, in the sense that it stores energy, then releases energy. And that would be the real mechanism, probably, that is, infrared radiation, for example. The motion of atoms is really force being exchanged between atoms. Maybe the atoms don't really move as much as the force between them is conveyed, but whatever. It's another stream of it. So much like you would say a ray of light, So I'll just play with this little bit, change the number, and that'll change positions, and then I can go, you can just see it reshape. And it's slower than it should be, and there's definitely elements that need to be tuned, but it really is as simple as the simple rules I've described, where there's just a simple rule that a force hits and it either reflects, gives momentum to the object and reflects, or the force itself is diverted and changed in its color, and that's it. So really simple. And it, does exactly what you could imagine happens inside matter between electrons and protons. Now, what I was thinking also, if I've had thought in the past, is shape. If I make these squares, they're going to become even more indestructible. Once they find a pattern, the pattern will stay. It'll be durable. It's already doing that as round objects. Once they're consolidated, they don't spread apart again in any dramatic way. They just break apart a little bit and then reconsolidate. But if I make them squares, they're going to be even more durable. So it could be that, the foundations of the universe really are little cubes, instead of little round things and all that kind of stuff. And that does make it interesting in terms of, it's a more stark, cold, and harsh and brutal reality, to consider that the whole thing might just be this simple. So, I guess I'll throw in some stuff on the kinetic energy and the objective of this channel, which is, obviously to be able to have this theory fairly scrutinized, and to be able to fairly scrutinize the existing conventional, I would call it nonsense, because it's so unevidenced and so thinly evidenced, let's say, that it's nothing more than superstition in a way. It's a tiny little correlations, and they've made this into the most proven mathematical theory in the history of mankind, and all these way excessive statements they make about how they've proven everything. So the most obvious defect, I would argue, I think bent space is defective as an explanation just because it's vacuous. There's no mechanism. They won't show you bent space doing this because it's all just, they'll just show you, there'll be no bits, and they'll just show the stuff sticking to each other like magic. There won't be any mechanism creating the magic. There won't be any physics. There'll just be a story of how it happens. They'll tell you what happens. They won't tell you how it happens. It's put simply. There just won't be a mechanism. And then you have the whole quantum mechanics stuff with entanglement. It's all the reach and superposition. And then you have a bunch of physicists now who are taking a step back and saying, well, superposition doesn't really mean, two things are in the same place at the same time, and it doesn't mean that it's something is not in a real state, that it really is in a real state. It's just that we don't know the state that it's in, and all this backtracking. But anyway, it's clearly very mushy and silly, I think. Okay, I mean, you can ask for, well, what's all the evidence? Show me the evidence. And once you start getting into the evidence, then you get into arguments about simple assumptions made about, like, the two-slit experiment, where they'll keep talking about the young two-slit experiment when that diagram doesn't work. Two waves don't solve the pattern. They don't predict it. They don't get the right answer. They get wrong answers. Two waves will get you the wrong answer in the double slit. Doesn't work, plainly. And they'll keep talking as if this is the reason why they believe it is because this works. Well, it doesn't work. It's not a good explanation. It's not a good foundation for a belief. All right. And then there's this kinetic energy thing. And that one, at the moment, this one seems so obvious just because the evidence is totally non-existent. So what I would like to do is pay a physicist, pay somebody who's, spent some time considering these subjects, and have them explain, why do they believe this? What's the evidence that convinces them? And if it's just formulaic evidence, like they just say, well, F equals ma, and I can do some derivation math and turn that into 1/2 mv squared. And I can just point out that that's not Newton's formula. The argument is that force equals a change in your momentum over a period of time. If you want to know the force in units of seconds, you can know it in seconds, you can know it in minutes, you can know it in hours, or you can know the total. And if you're knowing the total, then it's just going to be the total change in your momentum will be the total force that acted on you. That's what Newton said, that's what Descartes said, that's what they argued, that's what they defended. So they didn't believe in 1/2 mv squared, they didn't believe in mv squared. So, don't try to ride on the fact that you're paying any attention to the guy who did predict accurately. And he predicted accurately with momentum. He didn't predict accurately with 1/2 mv squared. So don't make up a fake history to defend what you believe. So let's just go through some of the arguments I would like answers to. So it's their theory, okay, that if I take a bowling ball, okay, I can slide this over a little, and that probably is good enough, right? You're not that picky, are you? I don't have the other camera on, so. So I have a 16-pound bowling ball going 8 miles an hour, so 8's the velocity, and I have another one over here, and I'm going to have a tug of war. So the 8-pound ball going 16. This one, you say, has twice as much energy. So this has 2x the joules of energy. Okay, this 8-pound ball. So you're saying in a tug of war, right, the 8-pound ball will use half of its energy, okay, to stop the 16-pound ball, and then it will use that half to make the 16-pound ball, move some 1/4 of the speed or something like that. But the fact is you're saying that the 8-pound ball will have enough energy, it has twice as much energy, to stop the 16-pound ball and reverse its direction. Do you have an experiment? Do you have any good reason to believe that will actually happen? And then say, with the spaceship example, okay, it's even more dramatic. You're saying that the bullet that has 2,000 joules, okay, and the 2 liters, the 2 kilograms, that has only 2 joules, you're saying that the bullet only has to use 2 joules of energy. So it's still got 1998 joules left. It'll just use 2 joules of its energy to stop the 2 kilograms. And now it can apply 1998 joules of energy to move the 2 kilograms in the same direction the bullet's going. obviously the bullet would have to give up some of its energy, so it's going to go a little less fast, blah, 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 blah. But we're talking about basically you're saying the bullet not only stops the 2 kilograms from going its direction, it's going to turn it around, okay, and make it go 500 miles an hour. Now, do you have any good reason to believe that's true? Do you have any good reason to think that the 2 kilograms going one direction has 2 joules? The bullet has 2 joules. Okay, and the fact is, it's a tie. The tug of war says you go nowhere. Your spaceship doesn't move, doesn't turn its direction. You throw one out one side, you throw one out the other side, it's the same difference. You only move 2 joules of energy in the universe. You only change the universe with momentum. Momentum is all there is. There isn't any of this. This silly number doesn't exist. And you don't have any evidence for it, and you can't show me any evidence for it, and you just believe it like people believe in Jesus. You believe in it because people told you this is the truth. It's not because you understand it to be the truth. And then if you would pay any attention to the history at all, okay, I mean, Leibniz is the guy who invented it. Leibniz was the exact opposite of Newton, okay? They hated each other, especially near their death, all right? So it's not the same physics. Leibniz failed to convince anybody in his lifetime. It was resurrected by a French aristocrat, okay, woman. She popularized it because she had money and she knew had connections and she had fancy parties at her house. So she convinced everybody that this stupid religious theory, okay, Leibniz was a religious nut, believed in mv squared because he thought Newton's physics was too atheist. That's his real reasoning. It was too anti-God. So he had to come up with something, okay, that made the universe more magical, that made more things possible. So just understand what you're proselytizing for, what you're arguing for with absolutely no evidence. It's a religion. And it was just a popular religion. And then in the 1800s, Young, the same guy who gave you the fake 2-slit crap, I mean, it's fake in the sense that it never was mathematically correct. Okay, the analysis, the 2-wave analysis. Oh, it's just like sound waves. No, it isn't. It's just like water waves. No, it isn't. The math isn't the same. It doesn't come up with the same answers. The patterns aren't the same. They aren't in the same place. The positions are different because it's a different function. Water isn't light. And light isn't a wave. Anyway, during the 1800s, they, fixed the obvious problem with mv squared. I mean, it was way off. So they put this half in front of it, all right, and created this fake idea that somehow this is Newton's formula. This is somehow F equals ma, and they create some fake notion of work. Work is how far you move something. Work isn't how long you're working. So again, they don't think it's work for me to hold this. They don't think it's work for me to if I hold 2 kilograms in my hand and I don't move it anywhere, I just hold it. You don't think that's work? When yeah, it is work. You're in gravity, you're opposing gravity, you're doing work. So that's how bad their formulas really are. They don't even have a connection to reality. They don't even acknowledge that you don't have to move something to some position. You don't have to make something. You can go back and forth and do just as much work as just going in one direction. The two things are the same amount of work. It's just the motion is all there is. And motion is momentum. Motion is pressure. Motion is weight. And so I just want to have this debate. I just want a real physicist to actually answer the questions. Point out how, oh yes, of course the 8-pound bowling ball just completely overwhelms the 16-pound bowling ball because it has twice as much energy. And yes, of course, the bullet, okay, with the 2,000 joules, yes, it completely, you tie a string to it and it'll cow across the space. It's not equal and opposite. The gun isn't equal and opposite. There's only 2 joules in the gun, the recoil, and there's 2,000 in the bullet. You get it? I mean, they say that there's this third law of Newton, so that's another one of Newton's things. They say Newton was right, and yet they don't believe any of Newton's rules, so they don't believe in it. There's no equal and opposite when you say the gun stock only has 2 joules and the bullet has 2,000. Where's the equal and opposite reactions? There's no equal and opposite there. They're overtly saying that can't possibly be true. You can't have it both ways. You can't keep 1/2 mv squared and then say you give a darn about anything Newton did, anything Newton predicted, or any of Newton's laws, because this violates them all over the place. So anyway, probably enough of a video. So just illustrating that the simulation is, makes it obvious for the people who need it to be obvious, but I mean, I've already explained it in concept. It was already conceptually easy to understand, but you're seeing it right before your eyes. Okay, this very, very simple answer to how the universe functions. There's force and there's matter, and there's just simple rules about how the force interacts with the little pieces of matter. And it's perfectly consistent with the evidence you have that there's plus things and minus things. There's blue things and there's red things, and they react to each other in equal and opposite ways. And you're seeing it right there. It's right in front of you. And you're saying that it's just a coincidence that this simple answer fits really, really well. That it does exactly what we would expect to see. And see the electricity between them now moving? See the forces are moving between them? You see it? Yeah, it's happening. And that's what is happening inside of every atom, and that's what's holding every atom together, are the same mechanism that's holding it together right there. A very simple mechanism. There's no swirling electrons. When 2 atoms stick to each other, it's because they actually share one of those things. See, I could put 8 things in here, and it'll create 2 of those little things, and they'll end up sharing the middle one. And then there'll be an odd one left outside, because now the 2 squares will be connected to each other through a conduit. So all of that will happen, and it'll show you how atoms stick together. They don't stick together because some electron is flying around, in figure 8s all over the place. That kind of crap isn't happening. They're not in some ambiguous position somewhere. They don't know where they are. They're in some sort of foam, or they're in some sort of cloud. All of that wooey crap is just bad guesses. This is the right guess, because it works, and it's simple. It wins the Occam's razor contest by a long shot, way ahead, 2,000 to 2. Yeah. All right. So So I'm just going to rub that in. All right, and just say, but that the whole point is nothing can happen. Nothing can change in the world until you allow there to be change. You have to have the courage to face the truth and argue it, defend it. But I can't get anybody to do that. I can't pay them to do it. But that's the only way anything can happen. Is they have to have the courage to care about the truth. They have to have the courage to step into the arena and say, okay, I can show how that's a silly coincidence. The fact that that simulation works and those simple rules work is just a coincidence. It doesn't mean anything, because our silly bent space and our silly woo physics and our silly wave physics is the right answer. Our silly bowling ball example, our silly notions that because something's going faster, it has millions of times more energy. Even though they have zero evidence. Again, they'll tell you it takes 4 times more fuel to go twice as fast in a car, for example. Twice as much gas somehow to go 60 miles an hour than it took to go 30 miles an hour. They'll prove it with nothing. They won't show you a single experiment demonstrating it to be true. So, as I've stated, I can just, all I can do is reason, and you won't allow there to be a contest between who's doing logic and reasoning better. These are cowards. Yeah, it's not much to say. So can any of you, any of you people who claim to be smart and, have spent time dedicated to understanding the physical universe, are you willing to show that you understand it? That your understanding works? That your model makes any sense at all? All right. That's all I can do. I can just reason with you. I can't force you to be reasonable. So anyway. But there it is. It's right there in front of you. Yeah. So anyway, till the next time and such. So forth and whatnot. This has been a DraftPhysics.com video presentation. And you just got to ask, what else am I supposed to do? What's the magic words? Please? Pretty please?